Yeah, you told us Saturday that rarely when you address the team after a game are you completely accurate. With a little bit of time to kind of look at the tape and digest things. What is kind of the message to the team that it is?
Yeah, what I shared with the team this morning was that they're capable but not consistent, and there's a difference. And so capability also is a complement and has to be in place. And gosh, I saw lots of capability, and I saw it throughout, and I saw it pretty comprehensively. I also saw inconsistency, and one of the things as you're building a football program and making progress is consistency has to be regardless or irregardless of context. And so it could be that you're behind, it could be that you're ahead, it could be that there's a lot of time left, it could be that there's not much time left. And so the context and circumstances also go together. So we're working to address all of that as quickly as possible. And I saw willingness, I saw effort. So I'm not sure how close that is to the message that I shared with you all or what you asked me after, but that's what I shared with them this morning.
I know it hasn't been very long. I'm not sure how much you've been able to review, but was there anything that surprised you that you didn't notice right after the game that you have a takeaway about now?
Not really. Sometimes there is, and sometimes the message is quite different to what I share with media, and then I watch the film, and sometimes it's different what I share with the team, so I've learned to not speak much to the team right after, other than initial thoughts. But not much in terms of surprise. Lots of work to do, again, in terms of consistency. Some groups more than others, some areas within groups more than others. But certainly, I like the way we competed. I like the way that we tried. Again, execution, consistency, and context. We have a lot of work to do in terms of maintaining that throughout.
You mentioned some areas more than others. Was there one specifically?
So there's, I think, with the nature of what Montana State did and does in terms of how they run the ball, certainly our front seven, consistency of execution, consistency of being coordinated and doing it exactly right. That part, glimpses here and there, but consistency from beginning to end, not where it needs to be.
Well, Coach, when you speak on consistency and execution, a lot of players mention that after the game last week too. I'm sure reps will come like that and game reps too. But is there a way you are able to teach the intention behind that?
Yeah, so there's nothing new from spring practice through fall camp. We have targeted basically triple the reps of any team that I've coached. And so this has been volume, volume, volume with that in mind. It was something we addressed and saw early on in the team. Making progress, making strides, still showed up in the game to a level that's not meeting expectations and still improved. But yeah, it's been targeted from, spring practice all the way through in terms of volume.
Coach, I'm just curious, how happy with the reaction of your team? Were they too defeated? What was their reaction after this and even today and stuff?
Disappointed and determined. I would say those two things. Clearly disappointed because they knew they led most of the game, had a convincing lead most of the game, didn't play well enough. Again, we didn't earn the victory down the stretch, so they're disappointed, but that moves quickly to determined. I'll meet with them again this afternoon in our format, but they're encouraged and excited, but also acknowledge the work that has to be done, and there's a lot that has to be done just for everybody.
For sure, and I know that the page turns quickly. You got Arizona. Just kind of your thoughts on this matchup.
Yeah, Arizona's really talented. They have a really good quarterback. The receiving core is great. Running back, so they're a talented football team. Challenge is great. It's the next step for the program, and yeah, we're looking forward to it.
Probably 4, 5, 6 critical moments like in a slump game back in your direction and all that. I mean, when you're working with the team that's learning how to handle those critical moments, how do you push that process along?
Yeah, I shared on an interview this morning. I got my hands on some research early in my coaching career based on the NFL, and the research was pretty clear that 3 to 5 plays per game determine outcome. And I found in my career that that's been about accurate. Sometimes 6, sometimes 4, but about 3 to 5. And so if you look down the stretch in this game in particular, gosh, there's 3 to 5, right? A couple times we don't come up with points, a big run out of the end zone, a 2-minute drive with a couple coverage mistakes. And really, after you play the whole game, right at the end, there's about 5 plays that end up making the difference. That's not really different than any game. And so you never know when those plays are. That's where the consistency part is so critical, because consistency overrides the 3 to 5 plays. The next thing that I shared with our team, that kind of going backwards, is sometimes those 3 to 5 plays, you can feel the momentum and you can feel that play, but normally all it takes is a routine play during that time. It doesn't take someone being superhuman. It doesn't take them being outside of their effort, their technique, or their assignment. It just takes them doing what they're supposed to do in an elevated context. And sometimes that feels bigger, or gosh, someone might make a catch or might make a tackle in one of those critical moments, but really it's just what they're supposed to do, and it's fairly routine, other than the setting or that play makes it seem, wow, that was a huge play. And so, yeah, we're working on just, again, putting it in context, making the routine play, doing what you're supposed to do when you're supposed to do it. And that means the heightened plays. It also means the every play, which could be one of those 3 to 5.
And you mentioned capability earlier too, and I don't mean to keep hammering this comparison, but like, you started at Virginia and you had that Richmond game. You said after that you felt you would always give the team probably too much and too short a window to kind of get things turned around. Is there a similar feeling here?
Well, really different. I'm glad you asked that. At that point, at that time, in that program, gosh, still kind of a feeling of discouragement, despair, and I'm not sure hope was even present in that locker room after. And while I had misassessed where the team was, we're much closer in terms of assessment. We've come a long ways from, gosh, culture and mindset, at least in relation to my expectations, not in relation to anything else. And so, gosh, the way they played the majority of the game, certainly not perfect, certainly flaws to be seen, but competitive, and they battled and they played well enough for a lot of the game to have the right outcome, just not quite enough. And that's a whole different feeling than, gosh, that Richmond game, which seems like about 30 years ago.
Specifically during the first set, how would you evaluate Eli?
Yeah, I would evaluate him very similar to the linebackers and very similar to the safeties in the run front. Inconsistent, capable but inconsistent. And so Montana State runs the ball very well, physical, and they execute very well with a seasoned group and a seasoned scheme. And I think it's year 4 of being together with that staff. So they have ready answers. And so if you're a gap off, they find it. If you're soft at the point of attack, right, there's movement. If a safety doesn't fit right in relation to a backer, in relation to a defensive lineman. So I've been asked a couple times already today about the defensive line. This is beyond the defensive line. D-line, linebacker, safety, coordination, and consistency on any given play. And just one gap off, they found it consistently, to their credit. And so, again, it's the collective front 7 rather than the defensive line, and they're equal to the linebackers/safeties in run support.
Arizona has a new coach, Brent, with very good offensive pedigree, and then an OC that I know you have some guys on staff good familiarity with. When you're kind of preparing for a team where there is some schematic uncertainty, what is kind of the approach?
It's tough. So you do the best to gain intelligence about what's happening. That's not spying. That's just trying to gain intelligence as to, who's calling plays and what system it is and what direction they're going. And so you do the best you can that way. Prepare for modifications, and really that's about as good as you can do. So we know both systems. We're familiar with both. It does take extra time, but really the personnel they have warrants most of the attention. What scheme they play and the similarities are some, but the personnel really is, I think, where it starts.
When you've seen the feed on tape, what do you mean from watching?
Yeah, holy smokes. He's really good. Yeah, and it's fun to watch a really good college football player. And so it's fun to see a good player.
UNM used 3 running backs on Saturday. We didn't see Andrew Henry. Might we see him in Arizona?
Yeah, you could see him possibly any game. There's been a running back battle. I think I alluded to that before the season. The running back room is deep, and just didn't quite emerge in terms of the way the game played out. But that could happen any game, and it could happen certainly against Arizona, based on how the game goes.
Coach, how do you get ready for an opponent after a loss like this? Like getting to psychologically ready for a bigger opponent in a classic game?
Yeah. So I'm not sure if I'm typical or atypical, and this is no offense to anybody. I really work hard to have the opponents be nameless and faceless. We have so much work to do on our own team, our own assignments, our own effort, our own technique, our own support of one another, our own culture, our own schemes. This is the next team, and yes, it's rankings, which mean nothing in week 1. It's TV, it's all of that, right? And so that doesn't mean that's not real, but gosh, the more we focus on something else than us, usually the less prepared we are. And so I do the same with my staff, and really very seldom mention the opponent. We're just talking about our schemes, our execution, and our expectations. And so, again, that's the way I choose to do it. Others acknowledge all the other things and focus on it at a higher level. Our players will be motivated enough. It's helping them perform at a higher level through their jobs and assignments. Doing their job is a huge message right now.
There's a belief that the biggest improvement is week 1 and 2. And I don't know if you believe that or not. It's their opener you've got on your blood. Does that give you any advantage?
Gosh, so number one, I don't know if the biggest improvement happens 1 to 2, but certainly improvement happens just by the feedback you get from playing against another opponent. So certainly that helps. Gosh, I'm so hopeful that the amount of improvement from week 1 to week 2 happens from 2 to 3, from 3 to 4, from 4 to 5 to 6. I mean, that's what I think quality coaching is. Sometimes it's not noticeable by the score. Sometimes the style of who you're playing against tells you something completely different than you learned in week 1, like it was the first game. I'm glad we've played one prior to playing this game. How much of an advantage, I'm not sure, but the feedback that we've gotten from week 1 is priceless in terms of now what to do on our way to week 2. How much that applies to what they're going to do schematically, we'll determine that kind of as we go. But I'm glad we've played for sure.
Anything else?
Yeah. On Friday, the NCAA Division I Council, or yeah, report of the NCAA Division I Council, is apparently looking at maybe just removing the spring portal window entirely and just going with the window after the season. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, we talked about that as head coaches, and my thoughts are mixed. My first thought is I support, and I think, and I don't know the numbers on this, which would kind of validate the answer. So we added 17 scholarship players after spring practice was ended, but I'm not sure of those 17 how many chose to enter the portal at that time versus how many had been in. I like clarity, and I think the winter window is enough. And I think, gosh, that would allow so much protection for the group of 5 teams, FCS teams, from having their rosters attacked at the end and leaving that uncertainty going into summer, trying to find new players. But I also think it's great for players to arrive where they're going to go at mid-year and then have the entire offseason with their team, summer with their team. And there's a giant difference right now in our program of the new players that have come, their level of preparation and immersion in the program from arriving in December to those that have been here a month or a month and a half, and them still trying to get caught up, and it's tricky. So I would support single window in the winter, even though we benefited from a lot of players coming into spring. I just don't know how many entered the portal at that time, and I don't know what that percentage is nationwide of portal entries in the spring, but I think it's good for the group of 5. I also think it's good for the young people to transfer mid-year. I think acclimation is huge. There will be probably some quarterbacks that will resist that. Maybe they lost the battle at spring, right? And they'll want a window there. That could happen at some other positions, but I think those numbers are small enough where that doesn't mitigate the entirety.
And then why did Juwan not play on Saturday?
Injury, and not allowed or really not comfortable talking any more about that yet at this point. But yeah, he wasn't able to play.
I'll follow up on the portal thing. Do you think that would create a further sense of urgency for student athletes to get in, and would that affect at all participation in the season?
Really good question. Possible to both. Yeah, I'm not sure. And you would hope that it wouldn't affect postseason, but it just seems like more and more is affecting postseason now, and the threshold for not to play unless you're in the playoff seems to be lower and lower to where yeah, I don't like the direction, but I think that that's likely. And new era, and hard for me to be critical on that. There's a lot of business decisions being made. I'm maybe more old-fashioned, but postseason matters to me, and playing with your team matters. Can I understand the other? I can. Still adjusting.
Lower usage for Tyler Keeney on Saturday. Was that simply a personnel thing? How did that?
Yeah, Bryce Santana has been playing really well through fall camp, and Tyler Keeney was hurt most of camp, and so Tyler's, re-emerging, practicing, re-becoming. But Bryce earned the chance to play and play a lot just by the volume of work, but how he's performed to this point.
And with Juwan out, you guys shut the line, Kevin Shaw left tackle and all that. What was your read on? I think those were his first real meaningful game reps before the game. What was your read on this?
He did a nice job. He really did. And McKenzie did a really nice job at center. So in a relatively short amount of time with a new constructed offensive front just days before the game, I was encouraged.
Having shown that they could boot out of the other center in the first game, is there any possibility it would work again?
Good point. Based on number of times it worked against our defense, it's probably going to work again. I don't know the exact number of times you hand it versus the boot, but Coach Beck has that dialed in about right, and it worked against us more than once, more than twice, more than 3 times between spring and fall. So how many more times this fall, I'm not sure, but it will be multiple at least, and I guess it'll work.
Thank you. Is one last thing. Is Tavian on the timeline to return soon?
Good question. I don't know the timeline. He's hopeful and I'm hopeful, but I don't know the timeline.